In 1986, German historian Heribert Illig started developing the phantom time hypothesis. This theory states that the years AD 614 to AD 911 never actually took place, and the early Middle Ages as we know them are a lie. Followers of this idea argue that key historical events and figures, from Charlemagne to Alfred the Great, either existed at another time in history or have never been anything more than fictional. Perhaps they were even the result of deliberate falsifications by a few powerful individuals. But is it true? Are we really living not in the 21st century, but in the 18th century? A pivotal moment behind this conspiracy was the introduction of the Gregorian calendar in AD 1582 under Pope Gregory XIII. This is the calendar we know and use today. But the Gregorian calendar is really a modified version of the Julian calendar, which was created in 45 BC. However, it had a significant flaw. It was based on lunar cycles, but miscalculated their length, so that each year on the calendar was really 10.8 minutes too long. This may seem like a small mistake, but over time the minutes added up. And in October 1582, the Gregorian calendar was designed to remedy the problem of accumulated time. To do this, it made the calendar 10 days shorter. This event sparked Heribert Illig's first concerns. He calculated that the 1,627 years that had passed since the Julian calendar began in 45 BC actually amassed a 13-day discrepancy. By skipping just 10 days in 1582 instead of 13, the new calendar only accounted for the extra time that had been accumulated up until 1282. Therefore, 300 years were missing from the Pope's calculations. But where did the Pope get an extra 300 years from to bring the calendar up to 1582? Well, the poor quality of material evidence attributed to the early Middle Ages makes this period the most likely candidate to have been fabricated. Historians of the era have always been heavily reliant on written documents, some of which have later emerged as frauds. For example, German historian Horst Fuhrmann has highlighted documents forged by the Roman Catholic Church. The fake documents claim to have been written several hundred years before they actually were, and they describe great moments of history centuries before the events are known to have happened. In fact, unreliable medieval records have been recognized as such a problem that in 1986, a large archaeological conference was held in Munich solely on that very topic. Illig's interpretation was that there was clearly something fishy going on with date calculation and counterfeit documents. What's more, theorists argue that other historical facts simply do not add up. For example, the existence of Romanesque architecture in 10th century Western Europe seems anachronistic, considering the time that was supposed to have passed since the fall of the Roman Empire. The phantom time hypothesis suggests that the space between the two eras was actually much shorter than we've been led to believe. Illig also disputed the reality of Charlemagne, the king of the Franks who united most of Western Europe during the early 9th century and laid the foundations for modern France and Germany. Illig wrote that, "Comparing all the biographies, I soon noticed that this ruler's achievements would have required the lives of 2, 3, or 4 normal men." The phantom time hypothesis offers possible masterminds behind the invention of the early Middle Ages. One such example is the Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, who ruled towards the conclusion of the 10th century. Dr. Hans Ulrich Niemitz argues that the emperor actually lived during the 7th century, but wanted to reign in the year 1000 AD, as it suited his understanding of Christian millenarianism. Alongside Pope Sylvester II, he and chroniclers reconstructed the past, creating Charlemagne as the model hero he himself wanted to be. During the 7th century, when Niemitz suggests Otto III really lived, illiteracy was rife and nobody owned a clock. To find out what day it was, members of the public had to ask a priest. With both scholars and religious leaders on his side, it could have been easy for Emperor Otto to carry out such a swindle. However, the majority of academics don't place much credence in the theory. Despite theorists' accusations of imprecision and misrepresentation, a variety of scientific dating techniques, such as dendrochronology or radiometry, corroborate the timeline taught to us in history lessons. Meanwhile, specific objects like coins and manuscripts attributed to Charlemagne and Alfred the Great, among others who are supposedly fictional, would require such a massive effort on the part of the conspiracists that it is almost impossible to imagine them pulling it off. Furthermore, Astronomical events like eclipses and Halley's Comet can be accurately dated to the same time that medieval records mention them, and detailed records from China synchronize with European events, according to the Gregorian calendar. As for the error in the Gregorian calendar, removing just 10 days instead of 13, there is a strong argument that it was deliberate. Pope Gregory XIII wanted the calendar corrected by just 10 days instead of 13, because then the date of Easter would match the official date agreed for it at the Council of Nicaea in AD 325, which was calculated using the vernal equinox. Nevertheless, even critics admit that the phantom time hypothesis cannot be completely and definitively disproven. So we must ask ourselves, based on the evidence available, could it really be possible that nearly 300 years of wars, people, artifacts and documents were just invented? In 1958, in a small lab at Oxford University, a biological revolution was born. A young scientist called John Gurdon cloned an animal from a single cell for the first time in history.